Goedenavond. Jeffrey Dahmer gaat de geschiedenis in als een van de wreedste seriemoordenaars uit de geschiedenis. Hij vermoordde 17 mannen op gruwelijke wijze. In Amerika is Dahmer veroordeeld tot 957 jaar celstraf. Geen doodstraf, omdat in de staat waar hij is veroordeeld de doodstraf nu eenmaal niet wordt uitgesproken. Het is deze week 3 jaar geleden dat Lionel Dahmer, de vader, hoorde dat zijn zoon was gearresteerd. Nog regelmatig bezoekt hij zijn zoon. Ze durven niet te spreken over de gruweldaden. Dat is allemaal te pijnlijk. Maar in deze reportage van onze Amerikaanse collega's van de NBC doen ze dat nu wel. Over de jeugd van Jeffrey, over cannibalisme en over de eeuwige schaamte.
You took my mother's oldest grandchild from her. And for that I can never forgive you. I hope you can deal with what you've done. Jeffrey, I hate you!
One after another, the relatives of his victims poured out the pain and grief they had suffered at the hands of Jeffrey Dahmer.
What's your name, fast?
Few crimes in modern American history can compare to the dark secrets that came out of apartment 213 in this quiet Milwaukee neighborhood. Investigators found 7 skulls and 4 heads, one of them in a refrigerator. In this blue barrel, still more body parts. After 13 years, the murder spree had finally come to an end, but not before at least 17 young men were dead, their bodies mutilated. Some had even been cannibalized to satisfy the killer's twisted sexual urges. After a 2-week trial in January 1992, Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to more than 900 years in prison.
This defendant will never again see freedom.
Little consolation for the grieving families, or for this man who listened with a combination of disbelief and shame. Lionel Dahmer, Jeffrey Dahmer's father. In a haunting new book called A Father's Story, he looks for the origins of his son's madness, and one of the first places he looks is in the mirror.
As I began to confront Jeff's childhood imaginings, it became clear to me that they had not always been wholly different from my own. These same needs and impulses had lived a shadowy half-life in me.
When you were a teenager, you had dreams of committing murder yourself.
Almost always after I was either physically or in some other way harassed by bullies, I would wake up, say, the next morning, and I would have this feeling that I had hurt someone, that I had maybe hurt them badly, that I had killed them. That's Jeff picking up dandelions. And
did he seem normal to you at this age?
Yes, a little bit shy, but normal, yeah.
But now, when Lionel Dahmer looks back at these home movies, never before seen on television, nothing, not even the most playful images of Jeffrey's childhood, seems innocent. Everything, even the most ordinary childhood events, arouses suspicion. A series of childhood infections, a hernia operation that seemed to traumatize Jeffrey when he was 4. At about that same time, something else happened. Lionel had removed some dead animals from the crawl space beneath their house and placed the bones in a bucket.
I noticed that Jeff had picked up these bones and just let them drop back down into the bucket and made a clanging noise. And he seemed sort of entranced by that. He just said, as he dropped them down, it's just like fiddlesticks, he says.
Looking back on it now, Lionel says he can't help wondering if there was more to it than just child's play.
I can no longer distinguish the ordinary from the forbidding, trivial events from ones loaded with foreboding. When he was 4 and pointed to his belly button and asked what would happen if someone cut it out, was that merely an ordinary question from a child who had begun to explore his own body? Or was it a sign of something morbid already growing in his mind? When we went fishing, and he seemed captivated by the gutted fish, staring intently at the brightly colored entrails. Was that a child's natural curiosity, or was it a harbinger of the horror that was later to be found in apartment 213?
What do you see when you look at Jeff's face?
I guess the parent, naive parent in me still says I see an innocent, shy child, a defenseless, vulnerable child who I wish I could help now.
Time to go, Jeff.
Every month, Lionel Dahmer, along with his second wife, Sherry, makes the 11-hour drive from their home in Ohio to the Wisconsin prison, where his son will spend the rest of his life.
Except for the guard towers, you wouldn't really see right away that it is a prison.
Though father and son have spent many hours together during these regular visits at the prison, incredibly, they've never talked about the horrific crimes that have made the name Dahmer so infamous. They've never talked about Jeffrey's childhood, or the many questions Lionel has had about why Jeffrey did what he did, until now.
Hi, Jeff. Sherry, how are you? Good to see you. It's good to see you.
The two of you never really communicated all that much, did you, father and son?
Not on any deep level, no. We talked about superficial things. Never really had a real deep heart-to-heart talk about what was going on inside our own minds.
Why do you think that was?
Because from about 15 years on up, a great deal of my thoughts were basically unshareable.
As a teenager, there were many things Jeffrey, or Jeff as he prefers to be called, felt he couldn't share with his parents. But in Lionel Dahmer's home, one subject was particularly taboo.
Did you ever consider talking to your parents, to your dad, about homosexuality? Is that something
No,
you felt you could
because
ever raise?
early on, I really didn't know that much about it myself. All I knew was that it was something that was to be kept hush-hush, not talked about, not even thought about. So I just kept it all within me and never talked about sexual issues at all, really, with anybody.
Jeffrey's secret homosexuality was only one force that drove him into his own world. His parents' incessant fighting was another.
It was unnerving, depressing, made me angry sometimes. I'd leave the house, go out in the woods and sulk, brooding, wondering why they had to have such a rough relationship.
Your dad says that somewhere around the age of 6, he thought that you began to change, that you began to withdraw, that you became much more shy.
Oh yeah, that's the time I really remember noticing that things weren't quite right.
So it wasn't so much innate shyness as it was wanting to withdraw from tension and arguments and problems in the house.
That's how I saw it, yeah. Just, I sort of lived in my own little fantasy world when things got too heated in the household. It was just my own little world where I had control.
That fantasy world may have been Jeffrey's retreat from violence as a boy, but as he grew up, it would become a world filled with violence.
Maybe I felt I had no control as a child or young adult, and that got mixed in with my sexuality, and I ended up doing what I did was my way of feeling in complete control, at least for that situation. Creating my own little world where I had the final say, where I could completely control a person that I found physically attractive, and keep them with me as long as possible, even if it meant just keeping a part of them.
One of your dad's biggest questions is when you began to slip away, when you crossed over into this world of obsession or dark fantasy from which you just couldn't return.
I think it was around age 14 or 15. Started having obsessive thoughts of violence intermingled with sex. And it just got worse and worse. I didn't know how to tell anyone about it, so I didn't. I just kept it all inside.
Tell me about this house right here.
One of the things Jeffrey kept inside early on was a bizarre teenage fascination with dead animals. This from a boy who 10 years earlier had played fiddlesticks with a bucket of animal bones. Lionel took us back to the neighborhood in Ohio where his son's strange rituals began.
That he rode around on his bike, took containers, garbage bags and so forth, and collected roadkills and brought them back and examined them.
It was something Lionel says he never knew about until the trial.
One of the biggest things that I've been wondering is just how on earth, how it got established with entrails, you know, with insides of dogs or foxes as you made your way around the neighborhood on.
I think it started out as just childhood curiosity.
Just to see what it looked like inside, or?
Right. And something went wrong.
Was there some pleasure in the cutting open of the animal?
Yes, there was. No sexual pleasure, but just a. It's hard to describe.
Sense of power, sense of control?
I suppose that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
It's impossible to know why Jeffrey's obsessions progressed from roadkill to humans, but it didn't take long. During our visit back to the old neighborhood, Lionel showed us where the stalking began.
When Jeff was 14, he rode his bike over here from his home a couple miles away at this location, hid in the trees and the bushes with a sawed-off baseball bat waiting for a jogger to come by.
And what was he going to do?
Well, he was going to hit the jogger over the head with the baseball bat, make him unconscious, and lie with a motionless body.
Do you remember at age 14 hiding in the bushes alongside that road, thinking about attacking the jogger?
Yes. Yeah, I remember doing that.
So that's the point at which it shifted from animals to people.
Years 14 or 15 in that area, yeah.
He never attacked any joggers, but it was on these same roads at age 18 that Jeffrey, now struggling with alcoholism, picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks and brought him home. The house was empty. Jeffrey's parents had recently divorced, and he was home alone.
I wish I just kept on going, but I didn't. I turned around, picked him up, and that's when the nightmare became a reality.
What happened after you took him to the house?
We talked, had some drinks. I knocked him out, and that was the first time.
In August 1978, about a month after the Hicks murder, Lionel and Sherry Jordan, his girlfriend at the time, went to check on Jeffrey.
What was the scene like when you came into the house and saw him?
He had a dead look in his eye, and he just looked extremely sad.
He was wandering aimlessly about the house. He was very uncomfortable. His mother had moved out. He was torn between the two parents. He was a lost child.
Was this about some kind of desire to keep these people with you, not to be abandoned, not to have them leave?
I think that did play into it, but there was a big element of wanting complete control over someone, total control, not having to consider their wishes, being able to keep them there as long as I wanted, and that was a big part of it. Lust played a big part of it, controlling lust. Once it happened the first time, it just seemed like it had control of my life from there on end. It was a major part of my thinking from then on.
Did you want to try to stop?
Yes, I tried. I tried to stop.
And the killing did stop. for a while. But Jeffrey says in 1984, while living here at his grandmother's house in Milwaukee, his violent compulsions consumed him once again. One night, cruising these bars in downtown Milwaukee, he met a young man and took him to this hotel.
I had put some sleeping pills in his drink to render him unconscious, and was just going to spend the night with him. When I woke up in the morning, my forearms were bruised, and his chest was bruised, and blood was coming out of his mouth. He was hanging over the side of the bed, and I have no memory of beating him to death, but I must have. And that's when it all started again.
And once it started again, you found it impossible to stop.
Right, that's when the obsession went into full swing. My only objective was to find the best-looking guy that I could. I went to bathhouses, I went to bars, shopping malls. Their sexual preference didn't matter to me.
Did their race matter to you?
No, their race didn't matter to me. The first two young men were white. The third young man was American Indian. The fourth and fifth were Hispanic. So no, race had nothing to do with it. It was just their looks.
Was it the killing that excited you, or is it what happened after the killing?
No, the killing was just a means to an end. That was the least satisfactory part. I didn't enjoy doing that. That's why I tried to create living zombies with muriatic acid in the drill.
One of those failed experiments to create a living zombie was conducted on this 14-year-old boy. Jeffrey had drilled a hole in his head and poured in acid, a crude attempt at lobotomy that none of his victims survived.
No, the killing wasn't the objective. I just wanted to have the person under my complete control to do with as I wanted. It's not easy to say that, but that's what the motive was.
Was there something sexual in the dismemberment of the bodies for you?
As time went on, yes, I did get there was a sexual part to that. I started saving the skeletons and preserving other parts, and one thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges, and so it just spiraled out of control.
Only years later would it become clear just how desperately out of control Jeffrey Dahmer had become, when police discovered he not only had killed his victims, but in some cases had actually devoured parts of them.
Why the cannibalism?
That was another step. It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
How did Jeffrey Dahmer get away with his murderous acts for as long as he did? As we found out talking to both him and his father, Jeffrey was not only a highly efficient predator, he was also a consummate liar.
I had to do a lot of lying, a lot of covering up, a lot of pretending.
Were there times when your dad may have been closer to discovering what was going on than even he knew?
The box incident was about as close as it came, yeah.
The so-called box incident happened in 1989, when Jeffrey had already killed at least 5 young men.
It was about a 1-foot square box, metal and wood box.
My dad one week came to visit and happened to see it, and he was wondering what was in it. He didn't know. Nobody knew.
And I said, Jeff, open it up. I just want to see what's in there.
We got into a bit of an argument because I wouldn't open it up.
And I said, Jeff, open it up, or I'm going to just take it down into the basement and get a screwdriver or something and open it up.
I was thinking, I've got to stop this from happening.
He got angry, very visibly agitated.
I thought, you know, it's all going to come crashing down now.
Not fathoming what could be in that box, I said, okay, we'll just open it up tomorrow then, and then let's get rid of it, whatever it is.
What was in the box?
The mummified head and genitals of a young man I met in one of the bars down in Milwaukee. But the box was never opened, not my dad's presence. And so the lies continued.
And so did the murders.
Gee, that Jeff can do that. Lionel does that. I'll claw
By the time Lionel shot this home video on Thanksgiving Day 1990, the murder count was up to 9. But you'd hardly know it watching Jeffrey relax in his grandmother's living room, engaged in small talk, as if nothing much was happening in his life.
You're looking good. Grandma was saying that she thought that you got quite a bit thinner, but you look fit. I don't know.
Well, I've been surviving mostly on McDonald's food. It's just so much easier just to pop into the restaurant. But
Yeah,
like I've said before, it gets too expensive, and
it does.
I have to start eating at home more. One of the main reasons for my continuing to do the things I did for so long was because I felt that I didn't have to be accountable to anybody. I felt that I could keep it in my own secret little world, keep everything under control, and would never have to deal with the consequences. And so things just progressed from bad to worse.
Your dad has wondered about all kinds of things, from the medication that your mom was on during her pregnancy, to the fact that you were exposed to violent arguments in the home from an early age and continuing, to the possibility that he might have passed on some genetic propensity for obsession or violent behavior. Does any of that ring true to you?
I can see why he'd wonder about those things, but as far as I'm concerned, they're all excuses. I feel it's wrong for people who commit crimes to try to shift the blame onto somebody else, onto their parents or onto their upbringing or living circumstances. I think that's just a cop-out. I take full responsibility.
How do you feel about what you did?
I'm glad that it's over. There's nothing, any words I say to the victims' families are just going to seem trite and empty. I don't know how to express the regret, the sorrow, that I feel for what I've done for their sons. I can't find the right words.
Is it still there, Jeff? Does it ever go away?
In part, no, it never completely goes away. I'll probably have to live with it for the rest of my life. I wish it would go away. I wish there was some way to completely get rid of the compulsive thoughts, the feelings. It's not nearly so bad now that there's no avenues to actually act on it. But no, it never seems to go completely away.
So the thoughts still come to you?
Sometimes, yeah.
De opbrengst van het boek van de vader van Jeffrey Dahmer komt ten goede aan de families van de slachtoffers. Maar sommige van die familieleden voeren processen om het boek uit de winkel te krijgen. Ze zeggen geen bloedgeld te willen ontvangen. Jeffrey Dahmer slikte tot voor kort Prozac, een medicijn tegen depressies. Daar is hij nu maar mee opgehouden. Zijn karakter verandert er toch niet door, zegt hij. Tot zover deze Avro Televizier. Goedenavond.